Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a really comprehensive, textbook-level look at central nervous system tuberculosis. We are going to map out the entire clinical landscape of this severe pathology, going point by point so you get a deep, structured understanding of exactly how this disease operates and clear up any concepts along the way. Let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll cover the scope of CNS-TB, the epidemiology, pathogenesis, standard therapies, multi-drug resistance, and finally, the BCG vaccine. We are not skipping a single detail here.
All right, Section 1, the scope of CNS tuberculosis.
So at the very center of this illness is a highly specific core pathogen. We're talking about Mycobacterium tuberculosis. It's an airborne bacterial pathogen. And, while a lot of people historically associate TB strictly with the lungs, it's actually fundamentally a multi-system disease. It is totally capable of devastating, widespread effects throughout the body.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the pathogen actually presents within the central nervous system itself. Intracranially, we see 5 main forms: tuberculous meningitis, which you'll often hear abbreviated as TBM, CNS tuberculoma, tuberculous brain abscess, tuberculous encephalopathy, and tuberculous vasculopathy. I really want you to keep TBM and CNS tuberculoma in mind, actually. Those two are massive focal points when it comes to both treatment and vaccination later on.
Immediately following those intracranial forms, we have the 4 distinct spinal forms of CNS-TB. We're looking at spinal meningitis, spinal arachnoiditis, spinal tuberculoma, and finally, tuberculous spondylitis. You might actually know that last one by its historical name, Pott's disease. And get this, evidence of Pott's disease has literally been found in ancient Egyptian mummies. It just goes to show how long this bug has plagued humanity. Seeing these distinct pathways visually really drives home just how invasive this pathogen can be across the entire nervous system axis.
To really grasp the true gravity of this illness, we just have to look at the massive global statistics. Despite being a completely preventable and treatable disease in modern medicine, tuberculosis is still a leading cause of morbidity and mortality. We are talking about a staggering 10 million new cases and 1.5 million TB-related deaths every single year.
So you might be wondering, where exactly does the central nervous system form fit into that massive scale? Well, CNS-TB represents roughly 5 to 10% of all extrapulmonary TB cases, meaning, cases outside the lungs. And it makes up about 1% of all TB cases overall. Now, 1% might sound relatively small, but remember those millions of cases we just talked about. And more importantly, CNS involvement represents the absolute most severe form of this disease.
Moving right along to Section 2, epidemiology and risk factors. The global infection load is frankly staggering. An estimated 1.7 billion people globally are infected with M. tuberculosis. To put that into geographic perspective, the vast majority of these individuals reside in 3 primary World Health Organization regions: Southeast Asia, the Western Pacific, and Africa.
But it's important to remember that infection doesn't automatically equal active, severe disease. When we look at who actually contracts active TB, it's really the underlying vulnerabilities that drive the progression. There are 7 key risk factors clearly identified in the clinical literature. Let's go through them: young age, co-infection with HIV, malnutrition, malignancies, general immunosuppression, alcoholism, and simply living in an area with endemic TB in the community. These are the exact critical pathways that allow the infection to really take hold and overpower the body.
Okay, let's move to Section 3 and see how this builds, the pathogenesis of infection.
Let's first look at the highly specific biological traits of the bacillus itself. M. tuberculosis is an aerobic, non-spore-forming, non-motile, acid-fast bacillus, often just abbreviated as AFB. What's really notable here is that it possesses a unique waxy coating, it's highly aerobic, and it primarily infects humans. These exact, unique traits dictate exactly how it survives and how it behaves once it breaches our defenses. So, let's walk sequentially through this incredible yet destructive mechanism step by step. First, an aerosolized droplet containing the bacilli is inhaled deep into the lung alveoli. Second, it interacts with alveolar macrophages. Our innate immune cells are triggered and they release chemokines and cytokines. Third, a T helper cell-mediated immune response kicks in, forming what's known as a granuloma to try and wall it off. Finally, and this is the most critical part for CNS-TB, during this process, some bacilli are filtered into draining lymph nodes and a hematogenous dissemination occurs. Basically, that means the bacteria spreads through the blood to highly oxygenated parts of the body, like the brain, before the infection is fully contained. Once inside the body, the bacilli are suppressed by a healthy immune system, but they can and will reactivate if that immune system is compromised.
All right, Section 4, Standard Antitubercular Therapy, or ATT.
And this brilliantly illustrates the standard consensus protocol for susceptible strains, which is broken down into two distinct phases. The intensive phase lasts for the initial 2 months, using the oral HRZE regimen. That acronym stands for isoniazid, rifampin, pyrazinamide, and ethambutol. Then, after those 2 months, it steps down to the continuation phase for the next 7 to 10 months, relying strictly on HR, so just isoniazid and rifampin. As you can see, it is a long, highly demanding regimen, even in the absolute best-case scenarios.
Which brings us to Section 5, Multi-drug-resistant tuberculosis.
To really underscore the immense and difficult challenge this presents globally, approximately 4.8% of new TB cases worldwide are due to multi-drug-resistant M. tuberculosis strains. That is a massive hurdle. It's a game-changer that completely shifts the entire treatment strategy.
So the crucial question is, what exactly earns a strain the MDR label? Well, the strain must be specifically resistant to both isoniazid and rifampin. And the World Health Organization protocol for this, it is grueling. It requires the use of at least 5 effective drugs initially, including a fluoroquinolone and an injectable second-line agent. Plus, the overall treatment duration jumps from that standard 9 to 12-month window we just talked about up to a massive 18 to 24 months.
Finally, let's look at Section 6, the BCG vaccine.
The BCG vaccine, or Bacille calmette-guerin, has a really unique biological makeup. It's actually a live attenuated Microbacterium bovis strain. That's a bacterium originally found in cattle, but it's utilized against TB in humans. Now, while it isn't routinely given to infants in places like the United States, it is an absolutely vital part of immunization programs in highly endemic regions of the world.
When we look at the clinical efficacy of this vaccine, there is a stark, fascinating contrast. For adult pulmonary TB, the vaccine provides limited and, honestly, highly variable protection. However, for newborns and children, the protective benefits against the central nervous system forms are just remarkable. It actively protects against TBM, prevents the death of newborns caused by tuberculosis, reduces overall symptoms if they do contract it, and there's strong evidence it significantly reduces the likelihood of developing CNS tuberculoma.
To give you a concrete statistical measure of this pediatric success, studies by Troons and colleagues showed an incredible efficacy rate of 73% specifically against tuberculosis meningitis and 77% against miliary TB. In endemic regions, those efficacy numbers represent countless young lives saved from the most severe forms of this pathogen.
So we're left with this final pressing thought. If we've established standard therapies and a highly effective vaccine that prevents the absolute most severe forms of the disease in children, what specific logistical, economic, or scientific leaps are required to finally eradicate this entirely preventable pathogen worldwide? I mean, why are we still losing 1.5 million people annually to something we literally know how to fight? It's an immense, complex global health challenge, and I really hope this detailed explainer gave you a powerful, structured framework to clear up those concepts and understand it better. Keep asking these big questions. And thanks for learning with me today on The Explainer.